Here we are.
Hey everybody, we're here. Sorry for a few technical difficulties, but I think we've got those straightened out. But we are here live on all the ABA's social media whatnots. My name is Nate Swick. I do digital communications and social media and host the American Birding Podcast. I'm joined, as usual, with my friend and colleague Greg Neise, who does web development here at the ABA. Greg,
And
you're doing
and
better
who
now.
spends at least 20 minutes every other Friday trying to refigure out the audio on this thing that's stitched together.
Bi-weekly is a tough thing to do because it's just long enough that you forget how it worked last time.
Well,
But
and
it's recent enough that you got figured out. Anyway, we're here. We're ready to talk birds and birding. If you have any questions about birds or bird ID or any of that stuff, please leave them in the comments. We're excited to get started. And we have, as usual, we have pulled a bunch of images from our What's This Bird Facebook group, and we're going to kind of work our way through some of the more interesting things. And Greg has chosen some real doozies this time, a real mix of cool ID problems and also some neat plumage abnormalities that we're going to talk about. But before we get going, Greg, you got any big bird news you want to talk about?
boy, it's
No?
been pretty boring here lately.
Yeah.
We had our first. I think the Upper Great Lakes. Well, not for Ohio, but we've gotten our first good snowstorm in the Western Great Lakes. So people's bird feeders are full of birds, and on the Illinois group and the groups around Wisconsin, Michigan, I see people are real happy that their feeders are full of birds.
Yeah, we actually had snow down here this week. Excuse me. A whole dusting. It shut down schools. It was a huge
Everywhere
deal.
everywhere from Arizona to the Northeast this week.
Yeah. But as far as birds are concerned, it's been pretty much the same. All the remaining good birds here in the Carolinas have sticking around. I've been following the snowy owl in Central Park drama pretty closely. I don't know if you have any comments on that. I have to say I've been pretty impressed with how the Central Park Rangers and the Central Park folks up there have managed what could easily be a like a garbage fire.
Well,
Rare
from
birds
what I've seen, it looks like the owl, chose a place that started off behind a fence from birders. It
Yeah.
was in a golf course
Convenient.
or something.
Very nice.
So that
baseball field. Yeah.
yeah, baseball field. Okay, so that started off on the right foot there.
Yeah. Yeah, and we talk a lot about not bothering vagrant birds and trying to be as careful as we can when we see those things, and being. I always think that it's more for the other birders, it's as much for the other birders as it is for the welfare of the bird. A lot of people are going to want to see this bird. It's a very cool bird, so let's be respectful of the bird's space so that it does not get stressed or nervous, and so that it kind of hangs around a little bit so as many people as possible can see it. That's always been where I come down on those things. And a snowy owl, it works. Like, it's a bird that you can see from a long distance. They like to hang out in wide open spaces. And, it worked out pretty well for this one. And as I said, the Central Park Rangers created a perimeter, and they've been managing the situation pretty well. I think it's been there for 2 days now.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. Well, I think it's great that the New York Times and other places have, I think the New Yorker and a bunch of other magazines have gotten in on this and said, oh, it's the first time in 130 years one's been seen in Central Park. And while that is very cool, there have been snowy owls all around Central Park. I mean,
they
all
show
over
up
the
on
place.
on Long Island and the beaches there pretty regularly.
Yeah.
So if you have any questions about birds or bird ID, please let us know. I haven't seen. Oh, there we are. I was just checking. I was wondering why we hadn't had any comments here, and they're starting to come through now. We're having that weird.
Yeah. So, hi, Mia.
Where, yeah. Hey, Mia. How you doing? Out in Utah. Great bird photographer. Please check out her stuff. She's been featured in Birding Magazine, if I recall correctly. But feel free to let us know in the comments where. Yeah, Tom Marson Ryan notes in the YouTube comments, similar situation with the snowy owl in Central Park with a long-eared owl in Boston. That's almost a little more difficult though, because long-eared owls, they roost in very dense thickets, and you have to get kind of close if you want to see them. So
Yeah.
that's a tough situation. I hope they manage that one better. I know they've had issues with long-eared owls in Central Park as well.
Well, I'm gonna.
So Greg,
Yeah.
do we want to do some bird
Yeah.
images? Do we want to jump right into
the. I'm gonna jump right into the first image here, and
we need some theme music to get going when we finally decide.
you know what?
To roll
As soon as I get this, as soon as I get this audio down right, then we'll do that. So I'm gonna switch over here, and let's hope it doesn't blow things up.
Oh,
and look, there we are. And let me see. Can I hear you? I can hear you.
Yeah. I'm going to talk. I'm going to talk until you can
that's
hear me.
good.
I'm going to pull up those images. All right. Yeah. So what we got here? We got some shorebirds. It looks like
we do.
One of them looks bigger. I'm not sure if that's a real thing happening or not, but
I think it's a real thing.
Yeah, one is definitely bigger than the others. Yeah.
So
yeah, okay.
I mean the four that we see the backs of are pretty straightforward, mostly because of the bill. We can see that kind of finely tipped bill, and the fact that these are little sandpipers. Now, again, if Ted Floyd were here, he would be like, "Why aren't they sparrows?
Why is it a sandpiper?
Why aren't they sparrows?" And we got to keep remembering that.
Yeah.
Well, for one thing, the very long wings. These birds are long distance migrants.
Wings. Yeah.
These birds are long distance migrants, and that's something when you see flying birds, even warblers that migrate long distances versus those that don't. So let's say blackpoll warbler versus common yellowthroat. Blackpoll warbler has longer wings.
Very long, thin wings. Yeah, it's so long that they kind of even crisscross a little bit in the back sometimes on a blackpoll warbler. Whereas a yellowthroat, as you say, short wings that don't quite reach the tail.
So, we've got these long-winged birds. The legs aren't too long. They don't really project past the tail. But they've got this kind of long sandpiper bill. And those two things there, the long wings and that general coloration with that white wing stripe. Most of our small shorebirds have some kind of wing stripe. There's a few that don't, but actually I can't think of any that don't have some kind of.
Yeah, I'm going through my head. I may have to pull out.
I can't either.
Off the top of my head, I can't think of any.
I mean, even purple sandpiper has a bit of a wing stripe.
Right.
So the three birds that we can see are four birds that we can see their backs. We've got this scaly brown coloration. We can see that the rump is not white. There's a black stripe down the lower back into the tail, or a dark stripe. But look at those bills. The bills are finely tipped, and the birds are smaller than the other one that we see the underside of. So those I'm comfortable calling least sandpipers.
Okay. Yeah, I go with that. Any kind of very small sandpipers that are very dark colored like that, I usually assume least sandpiper. And least sandpiper is very common winter sandpiper across much of the southern part of the lower 48, the ABA area. So you're going to have to convince me that it's not a least sandpiper in most cases if it's a shorebird like this in the winter.
Right.
On this sort of muddy pasture-y kind of habitat as well. What about the big one?
The big one. So that's a bit more difficult. Well, it's winter. So this is in Texas, and it's been kind of a warm winter for the most of it. But the choices get limited a little bit by date. But
yes, I was just going to ask, when was this photo taken?
It was taken
probably recently. Yeah,
and but it's tough because even lately now there's been more stragglers than there traditionally are. But we see this bird is white underneath. It's really white. And that makes me think of two sandpipers immediately, western and semi-palmated. And
Yes, especially if those small birds are leasts. Well, I mean,
yes,
everything looks big compared to a least, but even a very small bird like a western or semi-palmated sandpiper looks big compared to a least, which is pretty wild because
yeah.
semi-palmated western sandpipers are like house sparrows, like they're not very big.
And we can clearly see the black feet on this bird.
Yeah, yeah.
We can't really make out the leg. Actually, we can on the leftmost least sandpiper. We can make out.
Zoom in.
Well, actually, there isn't a leftmost one there. Let me see here if I can move this over because the photo's getting clipped. Whoops. Well, we just got off that one.
Go back, quick.
Let's see here if I can make this go back. I'm going to have to stop it and then restart it to go back. Or am I? Well, that other bird. I tried to move the picture over because there was one least sandpiper you could see the yellow legs on.
But the front one. I can see it.
When I clicked the image, it switched over to the next bird. But that was either a western or a semi-palmated sandpiper.
Yeah, and based on time of year, I would probably predict western sandpiper because semi-palmated sandpipers are mostly in South America by now.
And the key on that one is we couldn't see the bill, and because we couldn't see the bill, couldn't really call it. All right, so this bird, guy here.
Moving on to Mexico. Not New Mexico, but real Mexico.
Real Mexico. This is in Puerto Vallarta.
New Mexico was real Mexico once upon a time. Puerto Vallarta. Yeah, great. So we're thinking of birds that might not be here in the winter.
Right. So I mean, there's a lot of brown birds in Mexico. This looks, just judging by the size and everything, that it's not very big. The rocks and stuff don't look too big. And it's got that rich brown color.
Yeah, that's what really struck out to me on this bird as well.
That really kind of, it's not a sparrow, because all of our sparrows and the Mexican sparrows too show some streaking. It's got that thick bill, so you'll notice how the bill, even though the bird appears to be singing or drinking, the bill is open,
but turning away from you a little bit, but that's still a big bill.
Yeah, you can see how conical the bill is. But overall, this bird is fairly drab, except for the fact that it's got that rich brown color. Mm-hmm. But there is one thing that stands out, and that is the wing bars.
Yeah, those buffy wing bars.
Those big kind of brown, buffy, rufusy wing bars, and that is the key for this bird.
Yeah, it's a blue grosbeak. It's female blue grosbeak.
Yep.
Yeah. When I first looked at this bird, the rich color stood out to me. As I said, the bill looked a little bit smaller than I expect to see on a blue grosbeak, but I think it's a little bit foreshortened in this image. I think this bird is kind of turning away a little bit, or maybe it's sort of back. The photo is sort of. It's a little weird, but not that I would think. Indigo bunting is sort of the other one that could potentially be on there. Maybe varied bunting in Puerto Vallarta, if I'm not exactly sure what the bunting situation is down there. But yeah, generally it's big, it's chunky, it's block-headed, which is another thing I think of with blue grosbeak. And as you say, the wing bars there are a really great field mark for those birds. And blue grosbeak, and we occasionally have blue grosbeaks here in the southern tier of the ABA area and throughout the winter, though they are awfully uncommon.
Mm-hmm. And Jenny Shockley just jumped in. Hi, Jenny. Hey, Jenny. Good to see you there. And one other thing you can see too on this bird is that the base of the tail, like the lower part of the rump and the base of the tail, there's a little bit of blue.
Yeah, I was wondering if that was a photo artifact or if I was actually seeing that. But yeah, there's what looks like a little bit of blue there.
All right, we have
a couple questions.
Okay, go ahead,
Greg. That I'll throw at you. One from YouTube. Brian Rusnicka says, "Hey guys, sorry if you're seeing this twice. We're not, just once, Brian. Recently, he got his butt kicked by a dark Western Buteo in Washington. Any tips for dark rough-legged versus dark red-tailed?" Yeah.
Boy, We had one of those. We had one of those in Illinois that had people almost in fisticuffs.
Yeah. Huh.
And you know, if you can see it, the feathered legs on the rough leg, which is what gives it its name, the feathered tarsi. So that is, the feathering comes all the way down to what we would call the foot, which isn't really the bird's foot, but comes all the way down.
Toes.
Comes all the way down to the toes. If you can see that, that's a dead giveaway. There's usually some clues if you're watching the bird for any amount of time. Now, if it's just soaring, the shape of the bird is a good giveaway.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if they both appear totally dark, like the shape is the thing that would stand out to me. I mean, I don't see a ton of rough-legged hawks down where I am in the southeast. I did spend way too much time trying to find one just last week and failed. But just in my sense of that bird is that it looks very, I don't know, plush. I don't know. It's like a plush toy version of a hawk, right? It's kind of got a very rounded head as opposed to a big block slab head of a red tail. It's got a small little dinky bill.
It's got a little
compared to like a
parakeet
big
face.
honking bill. Yeah, exactly. That's a great way to put it. Yeah, like a little parakeet face. And it's the sort of thing, I don't know, it's almost like between a Cooper's hawk and a sharp-shinned hawk. You know, it's that sort of feel with the face and the head and the way the bird is soaring. Rough-legged just feels like a kind of like a fluffy version of a version of a buteo, whereas, you know, red tail is so substantial.
Well, and sometimes, often, there are other clues. For instance, roughleg has very small feet compared to a red tail. Again, if you can see the feet, that's a good mark. But they also tend to perch up on the very tip top of little branches, and they just get up there. They grab little vertical branches and hang on, and that's a favorite perch of rough-legged hawk, and that's something you'll never see, or very rarely see, red tails attempt.
I was just gonna say,
I never say never.
When I was looking for this rough-legged hawk at Alligator River National Wildlife Refuge in eastern North Carolina last week, I had a red tail sitting on the tippy tops of some branches too, and it actually kind of ticked me off because I thought that was rough-legged hawk is a real nemesis bird for me in the state. And I also had red-tailed hawks doing the hover kestraling thing too, which they do frequently. But from what I've heard from people who have observed this particular hawk, and I don't know if this is true like across the board or whatever, but the red tails tend to hover much higher than the rough-leggeds. The rough-legged was quite a bit lower than the red tails. At least this individual hawk. Maybe they're sort of partitioning themselves out on this one big field or whatever. But in places where there are lots of raptors, maybe that's what they do. Like Washington, like the entire western half of the continent.
Yeah.
But yeah, just some thoughts. I hope that helps, Brian. I don't know. I do have another question from Periscope from Twitter. Garrett Kenny asks, what is the best resource for gull identification on the West Coast? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Going birding with Alvaro Jaramillo is a good start.
Yeah, that would help.
The Dunn. I can't remember who the other author is. It's sitting back there on my bookshelf.
Yeah, it's Steve
Howell
Howell
and Dunn. Of course, how could I forget
that's
Steve?
That's a hard book to find these days. But if
it is a hard book to find, but if you can, it's a very good book.
There's a new gull guide that came out from Princeton called Gold Simplified. That's pretty good as well. I like the Howell and Dunn book better, but this one is pretty good and it's certainly easier to find.
Yeah, the Howell and Dunn book is kind of the I'm not going to call it the gold standard because I don't think there really has been one yet for gulls the way that there have been with some other birds like warblers. But if you're on Facebook, there is a group. There are two groups. One called North American Gulls, and another one called North American Gulls Advanced, and that is a really good.
I mean, North American Gulls is plenty advanced. I don't know why you need to go even further into the rabbit hole.
It's because the rabbit hole is so deep, and those two groups, but the North American Gull group in particular, is a very good place to sit in the same room, as it were, with all of the experts around the world. And really get into the nitty-gritty of stuff. And there's always these weird hybrids and off birds being posted in that group.
Yes.
And
yeah, that's the thing.
so you get much more exposure to those kinds of birds that are really confusing than you will in any book anywhere.
Yeah.
At least so far.
No, that's true. Yep. Yeah, going with people, even virtually, is definitely the way to kind of dive into it. You know, as Greg said, there hasn't been the definitive goal book, and maybe there never will be. But
I think there will be.
You think it's out there?
There's
like the
tea
Great
leaves.
American Novel.
There's tea leaves that I've seen that indicate that there is one on the horizon.
All right. Well, there you go. Hope that helps. Garrett. All right, let's move on to the next bird. If you have any other questions about birds or bird ID, please shoot them at us.
Okay, let's see if this works without blowing up the studio here.
Yeah, Chris Spurgeon asks, what is the title of the Dunn Goal Book? It is I think it's Gulls of North America.
Yeah,
it's a Peterson reference guide. It's a blue cover with a big, it's got a gull in the front. But
yeah, I mean, if you Google Howland Dunn Gulls of North America, you'll pull it right up.
Yeah. Jacob Bagley asks, Greg or Nate, I would love to know your most recent lifer. Do you remember your most recent lifer, Greg? I know mine. It was late last year. Mine was varied thrush. There was one hanging out at a feeder here in North Carolina, and I went to go see it. It's still there as far as I know. It's been there for almost 2 months. But I've not done any birding in the Pacific Northwest, so that was finally came across one. It's a neat bird.
I can't remember my last lifer. It's been that long. It's probably been 3 years.
Check it out. Yeah.
I can tell you what my last state birds were.
There you go.
And county birds and backyard birds. I'm gonna guess my last lifer was clapper rail, which was some 40 years overdue, and one of such a comical thing. I'm tempted to write an essay about it because it was just ridiculous how long and how difficult it was for me to finally see a clapper rail.
Yeah, my last state bird was last week. I went out on a run because there were 4 possible state birds all hanging out relatively close together in North Carolina. So I ran off and I got vermilion flycatcher and black-throated gray warbler pretty quickly and easily. But I skunked on the rough-legged hawk as I talked about earlier.
Well, my last state lifer was the Great Kiskadee, about an hour south of Chicago in December.
That was a good bird.
All right, I'm gonna try to switch this, and hopefully it won't blow up.
Go for it. All I have to do is scroll down. We got a flock of birds here. Greg.
Oh, here we go.
The flock.
So this was posted, and the person who posted it said, "We have 2 different kinds of birds here. What are they?" I suppose that's technically correct.
Technically correct, yeah. So we're here in Florida. What we've got are some very lanky, tall blackbirds with very large tails. Some of them are glossy black, and some of them are kind of an attractive chestnut brown with a nice little eye line. And as you might expect with a group like this, where they are kind of mingling freely together, they are not 2 different kinds of, they're not 2 different species of birds. They are, in fact, male and female of a single species.
Let's back up a minute. So we're looking at blackbirds. And in the winter, blackbirds flock, and they flock in multi-species flocks. And you can get, cowbirds, redwings, rusties, brewers, all in one flock, depending on where you are and what time of year it is. So what we're looking at here is, we've got these blackbirds, like Nate said, and the first giveaway that it's not a crow, because we really can't tell the size all that great, is that long tail. And the long tail is really the giveaway here, because when you see a blackbird like this, with a long tail like that, you're immediately down to 3 species in the ABA area, and those are the grackles and
the Anis.
Oh yeah, yeah. Of course. If we saw
Playing the
15
role of
Anis
Ted
walking
Floyd.
around in the mud,
And that would be pretty. That would be a pretty hot record,
that
especially
would
these
be
days.
that would be something. Um, but now, if you
We're
look at
walking
the
on the
shape,
ground. Anis don't walk on the ground too much.
no, they don't. They
all.
don't.
I
They
don't
don't
think
have
I've
the
ever seen
feet.
them
They
on
don't
the
have the
ground.
feet for it.
Yeah.
But if you look at the shape of these birds, the brown ones and the black ones are the same shape. They're the same size,
Yeah,
they're the
more or
same
less.
build, and
Yeah.
they're basically the same shape. So that is a clue that we're looking, as Nate said, male and female of the same species. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, so as you say, the grackles are the way to go. And in Florida, you've only got two. You've got your common grackle and your boat-tailed grackle. And well, look at the tails on these things. Well, I mean, common grackles have tails that are kind of boat-shaped too, but they're not as
Yeah,
big.
not
They're
as big.
certainly, generally speaking, as birds, they're not as long-legged and kind of large-bodied. They aren't as hefty. They're
Yeah.
much more kind of compact. And it's Florida, so there are boat-tailed grackles everywhere.
Yeah,
Though
and I mean,
across
look at that.
most of the rest of the continent, they're just close to the coast. But in Florida,
And,
they're all
and,
over the place.
and look at how leggy that one, the male facing
Very
away from
leggy.
us in the
Yeah,
middle. You
very
see how
leggy.
leggy that is?
Yeah.
Common grackle never looks like that.
That's true.
They just
Yeah.
and now the
There
female.
is a period when the male boat-tailed grackles will molt their tail, and so they'll go through a period where their tails are actually kind of short, but you never lose that kind of large-bodied, long-necked, leggy look. I mean, they always have that.
Okay, I'm gonna try going over to the next one here. There we go.
Scrolling down. Okay. It's got its back to us.
It's got its
Rude.
back to us. And this is in California, as it says there on the screen. And boy, what can we tell about this bird? Well, first of all, the back, we can tell all kinds of things about the color of its back. We can see a bit
Yeah.
of its rump, and we can see its
Kind of a neat
tail
pattern.
fairly. We can see its tail fairly clearly. We can also see that it has very short wings. It's like all secondaries. I can't. Yeah, I guess I can see primaries down there in the shadow a little bit, but this bird has very short wings, which
Not a bird
as we
that
were-
flies a lot.
Exactly. We were talking earlier about long distance migrants versus short distance. Well, this bird looks like it just stays put. Now that back pattern.
Yeah, it's
I
kind
mean,
of-
because let's back. Actually, the barring on the wings and the tail, and especially the tail, there are not very many small birds like this, and we can tell it's kind of small again because of the rocks. That have banded tails. And I think, and I wish Michael Redder were here because he's kind of a font of this knowledge, this kind of knowledge. But the only birds we have that have barred tails like that, small songbirds that have barred tails, are the wrens, and I believe Cassin sparrow.
Well, this doesn't look like a sparrow to me.
No.
It's standing tall. It's got long legs, and even though Cassid sparrow is a pretty long-legged sparrow, it's not this tall. And the head is, it's bigger than I expect a sparrow. Sparrows are kind of very all body and relatively small head. Yeah.
And it's so I think we can narrow it down to wrens, and out west there's a lot of wrens. But that gray back with the little white spots and the kind of rich brown rump that doesn't turn into a rufous tail is unique, and it's a unique color and it's a unique pattern. And if this bird will turn, it is a rock wren.
Oh, thank goodness we have a photo that shows the bird turning. But yeah, rock wren. Yeah, you can see that pattern on the back, that really kind of neat, subtle speckling all over the back is really cool. That's a rock wren thing. Canyon wren is much more rufous all over, but though it is a similar shape and size.
Canyon
but
wren's got a
much
little
more richly colored.
Yeah, it's got a bit more of a I think the tail's a little bit longer, but the tail is bright rufous. It's like you know, the bright white undersides and the bright rufous tail is what you notice on a
Yeah.
canyon wren first.
And you can see
Unless it's
that
singing.
the wings are, yeah, yeah. I love the
It's got
canyon
a
wren
love.
song. I heard
Canyon
someone
wrens have a
describe it.
lovely song.
It's like someone falling off a cliff and then splat at the bottom. Do 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 do.
While playing a flute.
Yeah. Well, yeah, falling off a cliff while playing a flute. Yeah. So a funny thing about the rock wren though is because of all the wrens, it is the one that has the biggest pattern of vagrancy. These things tend to show up on the East Coast every once in a while, and you wonder exactly where they are. But they're always on rocks, almost always, on like rocky groins and jetties and things of that nature. There was one in Maine this year that stuck around quite along. They have rocky coastlines. Like this is home to me. There was one in Prince Edward Island. You know, Virginia gets them every once in a while on the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel. Things like that. It's a cool bird. So we said it doesn't fly much because wrens don't fly much, but rock wren will turn up anywhere.
And yeah, I mean, there's, you know, even birds that don't fly very much can get up and move. You know, rails are notorious.
Yeah, I guess
for
rails are
that.
kind of classic. Yeah.
But so let's move on here. Now, this one, the person who posted it said this was right after a snowstorm. Somebody's saying that our people are saying on Facebook that we have frozen.
It doesn't look like you've frozen for me.
Maybe the whole
like it's coming through fine. No,
everything looking
good.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll wait and see if anyone else comments, but
okay.
Everything looks good on my end.
Good. So this was right after a snowstorm, and one of the birds that we get a lot in What's This Bird is Carolina wrens sleeping in people's porches, and they get up into the parts of a house, you know, it's a garage or a porch or whatever. They fluff up, and they look a lot like this bird. And the person who posted it asked if it was a cactus wren. What do you think, Nate?
I mean, if you didn't have any idea of what the size is, I mean, it is sitting on some firewood logs, so that does look like it's a pretty significantly sized bird. But generally speaking, like cactus wren is not a terrible guess from a photo. You know, not seeing this bird in life. It is brown and white streaked. It has a big bill. It's got a long tail. Those are all. That is a description of cactus wren. I can see where they were thinking on this.
Mm-hmm.
But no, there's some other things that. I mean, it feels obvious to me, but I understand why people would think cactus wren.
Sure.
Because you're not seeing the crest, and this bird is all like hunched up, and you don't usually see them. They're usually kind of long and lanky and stretched out and long-legged and standing up high, and so.
But it's also, you know, it's also got a heavier bill than any wren that, you know, we have here. That bill is heavy. It's got a good hook on the end of it, and it's also got some bare skin around the eyes, which none of our wrens have bare skin around the eye like that. And those two things with everything else, this is a greater roadrunner, not looking very much like a roadrunner.
Looking a little worse for wear there, but king of the cuckoos, greater roadrunner,
king of the cuckoos.
One's for my friends at Red Polling, but it's I think people think of roadrunners definitely as hot weather desert type birds, but they are tough. Like they are stretching kind of northward. You can see them in the snow. Where I grew up in Southwest Missouri, they hang out in the Ozarks, like in neighborhoods, like a neighborhood bird, which is I can't get over seeing my Missouri State roadrunner running around like a grassy green lawns of a housing development. It's a very odd feeling, but roadrunners can be just about anywhere.
We have Ozarks and a lot of lizards in southern Illinois, and we're just waiting for our first roadrunner.
They just got to get over the Mississippi River. They just
don't cross the river.
They don't like to fly.
I think there's one record on the other side of the river, and it's like just barely.
Yeah, you would think that they might cross on like a railroad trestle or a or interstate, or any of the number of the bridges that are over the
Right.
Mississippi River. That is uncountable. But I don't know that they'd go over on their own, but they might like walk across a bridge or
Yeah.
some sort of hard structure. Yeah, neat bird, greater
Yeah.
roadrunner. Love a greater roadrunner.
All right, so let's push the button.
Yeah, this is a neat bird. This next one, I like this.
So
I will say before we get going on this, if anyone has any other questions about birds or birding, please let us know in the comments. We're happy to take those. We'll pause in the middle of our what's this bird stuff, and we'll talk about it. But yeah, let's move on. Just wanted to say that. Just want to let folks who are coming in late know.
absolutely. Wow, this is people who have been birding for even a little while look at this bird and say, I think I know what it is, but it's showing all the field marks of a downy woodpecker. Small bill, 2 toes, zygodactyl foot with 2 toes facing forward and 2 back. It's got the barring on the tail and the pointed tail feathers. But wow, what's going on with that coloration?
Yeah, this is one of those great, and we've got another bird we can talk about this too. Whereas you can't go by just one field mark, right? If you see a bird and everything looks good for a species, but there's one weird thing about it that doesn't match, you got to go with the preponderance of evidence. You got to go with the most of what you see. And yeah, as Greg says, this is a downy woodpecker, but it's got some weird the plumage abnormality, and you might think that maybe it's a pigment sort of thing, but I suspect that this is a bird that's been foraging on a tree that is leaking a lot of sap, and it's getting all over its feathers, and it's causing that discoloration. That's my suspicion.
Either that, or I've seen this a few times in my mother-in-law's backyard, actually, where they will spend the night when they're woodpeckers sleep in the holes in the trees that they make, as well as nest and raise their young in them. But they maintain a hole to sleep in throughout the year. And I have seen downy woodpeckers look like this after roosting in a decaying river birch or some soft tree like that, and they get stained.
The tannins leak out,
by the tannins in the tree that they're sleeping in.
It's the same thing that causes like a river, like a slow moving river in the southeast to turn black or green or whatever. It's the leaching tannins out of the trees, and they can get in water, they can get in feathers. Yeah, that's a good theory as well. It's a neat bird, and it does, as Cliff Hawley points out in the YouTube comments, it looks like the Pacific Northwest version of this species more than the eastern one, because the birds tend to get darker as you get to the Pacific Northwest, move from east to west. The Pacific Northwest in particular has a lot of subspecies of birds that we in the east might think of as looking a certain way, but they all kind of look sooty or rufusy or just darker in general because of the rains and the forests. It keeps their feathers tougher. It's a better camouflage and things of that nature. Yeah, so they do have a lot of rufous on not a lot, but a little more rufous on the side than those birds in that part of the continent, I should say.
Right, I'm going to push this button again. I've forgotten exactly what's coming up next. So let's see here. Oh, there we go. Now I remember.
This is another weird bird.
This is another weird bird
that has some feather issues. But as with the downy, you look at the other stuff, not just the fact that the coloration looks a little bit odd.
Yeah, no, if I had time, I could have pulled this into Photoshop, and even though it doesn't need to be, I could have color corrected this bird to help with this ID. But this kind of diluted plumage, which some people call leucism, leucistic, I call it pigment challenged because it really isn't. But these kinds of birds it's interesting because now that there's so many people out photographing birds, we see a lot more of these than I was used to. I mean, I would
Yeah.
see,
Yeah.
for instance, American robin. I'd see one or two robins a year that had white patches on them and so on. But now I'm seeing pictures of them almost every day
Hmm.
in the various Facebook groups and other places that we monitor bird pictures.
Yeah. Everyone has
And
cameras in their pockets now, and they're quick to take photos of weird things.
yeah, so if we ignore the fact that the plumage is so washed out on this bird, we can see all the markings of a white-throated sparrow. We see the bold crown stripes. We see the yellow lore in front of the eye, above the eye
Hmm.
there, or supraloral. Actually, it's not the lore; it's above the lore. The heavy bill of a sparrow, the white throat. Um,
Yeah, the
Pretty,
shape just screams, zona trichia to me, which is
yeah,
that kind of big-bodied sparrow genus that includes white-throated, white-crowned, golden-crowned Harrises. They all have that very kind of large, round shape, and they hop around on the ground. So you can clearly see that's sort of where you're going. Someone in the YouTube comments noted maybe Savannah sparrow. And it does sort of look like an Ipswich subspecies of Savannah sparrow, which you would not see in Oregon, and but yeah, it's very pale. It's got the yellow, and the yellow lore is sort of the yellow lore area, I should say. It's super, as you said, super laurel as opposed to the actual lore. That's sort of what we want to look for in a Savannah sparrow. But
hmm
the big body, the roundness, the long tail, those are all things that you wouldn't see in a Savannah sparrow, which tends to be kind of more
yes,
slender and short tailed.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that is the last photo we have. Can you scroll on your end and make sure of that?
That is where the birds end for me,
Okay,
Craig.
so now we're back. Uh, we're done with the pictures. Let's. Any other
Yeah,
comments?
if anyone has any comments, we've got a few minutes here. I do have to bounce in a little bit. Today is my daughter's birthday, and she just got home from school, and she wants to open her presents. So I don't want to take too much time. But if anyone has any questions about birds or about birding, please let's throw them out there. We will be happy to take them as they come. Sandy McConnell Berger notes that constant photos on state Facebook groups. She follows Oklahoma and Arkansas sites, and there are always pigment challenged birds in them. It's so true. People
Yeah.
tend to wonder what they are, but they are common. And I have noticed here in North Carolina, the best way to find pigment challenged red-winged blackbirds is to look through the flocks for yellow-headed blackbirds, because you're looking for the light in the head
Yep.
and the white spots, the white splashes in the wings, and those always turn out to me to be partially leucistic or leucistic, however you want to pronounce it, of red-winged blackbirds, which are way more common than you realize until you're looking for those yellow-headeds.
Uh,
Aiden Perkins
Je-
asks, "What's your favorite winter sea watching story? Do you have one?" Lake watching. You can say lake
I could say lake
because
watching.
you don't live on the sea.
Um, Winter lake watch. Well, we do our lake watches in like we kind of end them in November. Um, my favorite Great Lakes lake watching story is we had a debate. So we had a storm system coming in that was going to generate 40-mile-an-hour winds from the northeast. Actually, excuse me, northwest. And it was right at the right time for Sabins gulls and long-tailed Jaegers. So that would have been in September. And there was a lot of discussion about, is it going to be good? Should we go down there? Should we do it? It's about an hour drive from Chicago, from downtown Chicago. And some of the people had said that the winds, it's just too much wind. It's like once you get above 25 miles an hour, the birds are not going to be up. They hunker down. They get out of the wind. It's not going to happen. Well, a few people went down there. 50 Sabins gulls went by.
Wow. That's really cool.
I mean, an inland record by an order or two of magnitude. I mean, several
Yeah.
orders of magnitude.
Yeah.
But so that's one of my favorite Great Lakes lake watching stories, and I'm
I saw a
sure.
cool thing when I was out on the Outer Banks last fall. After the week after Thanksgiving, my family and I just decided to go to the Outer Banks since my kids are we're on online school, and so it's like, hey, we can just pick up and leave our house and go stay on the beach for a week. So we did that, and I was out. I would go out in the mornings with my scope and just kind of sit out there and kind of watch the birds go by, and typical sea watching stuff on North Carolina in late November. It's a lot of loons. A lot of cormorants going by, a few flocks of scoters. It's a little early for them. Get lucky and see a Jaeger fly by about once a day. And so I was out there watching these gannets just off the coast diving. And I saw this big commotion out, towards the horizon, not quite on the horizon, put my scope on it. And there was a bald eagle that was flying out over the ocean and was like going after what apparently I couldn't tell, but what I thought was a dead northern gannet, because there's a lot of kind of dead young northern gannets kind of washing up every once in a while. It was going after it and trying to like fight with all these gulls to try and pick this thing up, and it turned out that whatever it was too heavy for the bald eagle to pick up, so it had to have been a gannet or something that big, or a pelican or something like that. It eventually had to abandon it, but it was so cool because I usually don't see bald eagles out over the ocean like that. Usually they're on the mainland, not on the Outer Banks. So that was kind of a neat thing, and then to see it kind of battling with all these gulls over what must have been something really choice out on the ocean was really cool. Jacob Bagley at YouTube says, Greg, he feels like you said a few sessions ago that your last lifer was an auklet.
I was just about to say. What? I'm sorry. What was that?
An auklet or merlet in Washington.
Oh yeah, that may have been it. I forget the actual date, but it was either ancient merlet or clapper rail. But yeah, ancient merlet. I forgot about that. But now I was
people who've been watching these things over and over again.
I was just going to bring that back up. And for those of you watching, the getting this thing rolling, the technical aspects of getting this and getting the sound going every other Friday kind of like zaps my brain. But going back to that question of my last lifer, I think I know what my next lifer is going to be. I'm getting
crystal ball.
I'm getting notice now of a common crane, which is the Eurasian species, about 2 hours from my house in Jasper, Indiana. That was found today.
Is that how many records common crane in Illinois?
There's none.
Any? I was going to say.
But this is in Indiana. This is in Indiana. No, the hooded crane is from Indiana too. The same spot.
Yeah.
Or no, not the same spot. That was further south. But this is in Indiana. And it just shows up. There's a little discussion about the plumage, but I haven't had a chance to look at it. But so far, people are saying it looks good for a common crane in Jasper, Indiana. Cool. Which the last one that showed up was in the 1990s, I believe. 1990.
I want to say those. I want to say those cranes that go through Indiana are ones that spend the winter at the it's a wildlife refuge in eastern Tennessee that starts with an H, and I cannot remember what its name. It's one of those Native American names with a lot of vowels. And but there was a whooping crane and a common crane there. That was where the hooded crane was for a very long time, and that's got to be where they're coming. Which means that I don't know if they've had common crane records in Tennessee. So maybe it's
I don't know.
On its way
it may be headed down there. The hooded crane certainly did that, and I'm going to have to come up with a breaking news Chiron for this kind of a situation.
Like CNN,
just in
birds,
just in from our mothership. Well,
Jacob Bagley also notes he's going birding in Arizona tomorrow to get sandhill crane, caracara merlin, and prairie falcon.
Nice.
All potential lifers. Good luck to that, Jacob.
Well, it is right at the end of the half hour. I think you're going to have to go to a birthday party.
Yeah, I got to go to a birthday party, but just the family. We don't actually go anywhere. But right. We'll be back in a couple weeks, everybody, and so keep an eye out for us, and we'll do this again. If you have any other questions, Hiawassee. That's it.
Yeah, a lot of vowels.
Yeah, we'll be back in a couple weeks and we'll do this again, and we'll see you then.
And don't forget, if you enjoy what we do, you enjoy what the ABA does, right up here, join us. Become a member. Help support what we do, because this is what we do. This is our day job. It's membership. It's memberships that help us do everything from the website to the magazines to this to the podcast. And we really appreciate it. And we want you to join. Join the club.
Yep. Join the club, literally. All right, y'all. We'll see you next time. And
see ya.